The aroma of roasted beans usually brought Amelia Vance a fierce joy, but today, it did nothing to soothe the dread gripping her. Her fingers trembled, crumpling the thick, cream-colored envelope that had arrived with the morning's mail. "Amelia, what is it?" Lena asked, her voice laced with concern as she saw the color drain from her friend's face. The legal notice from Thorne Coffee Co demanded she cease using her daily grind slogan or face the consequences. The fluorescent glow of her desk lamp cast long shadows across the piles of legal documents scattered across her small apartment table. Amelia, at 28, looked older, the lines of exhaustion etched around her eyes. She traced the harsh legal jargon, her stomach churning with each word. Thorne Coffee Company versus the daily grind. It wasn't just a coffee shop, it was her life, her inheritance from her grandmother, every penny she'd scraped together after her art school dreams had faded. How could she fight a corporate giant? Her savings account was barely enough to cover next month's rent, let alone a legal battle. It felt overwhelmingly unfair, a cruel joke played on the small by the powerful. "It's not over, Amelia." Lena's voice was firm, cutting through Amelia's despair in the cafe's cramped back office. Lena, with her fiery red hair and even fiercer loyalty, placed a comforting hand on Amelia's shoulder. "We'll get a lawyer, even a pro bono one. We'll rally the regulars, start a petition. They can't just stomp on us because we're small." Amelia looked up, her eyes watery. "They can, Lena. They do. We barely break even as it is. What's the point in fighting a losing battle?" "The point," Lena retorted, "is that this isn't just coffee. It's our coffee. And we don't give up without a fight." The law firm's conference room was a monument to sterile power. Polished mahogany, coal glass, and a silence so profound it felt oppressive. Amelia, dressed in her best but still modest skirt and blouse, felt like an intruder. Lena sat beside her, radiating quiet defiance. Mr. Harrison, Thorne's lead counsel, was a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes. Just as he began to speak, the door opened, and a man stepped in. Julian Thorne. Everything about him, the impossibly tailored navy suit, the confident stride, the piercing blue eyes, screamed wealth and undeniable authority. Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. He was the giant, the man who could crush her. As the meeting adjourned, a surprisingly gentle voice called her name. "Amelia Vance?" Julian Thorne stood apart from his legal team, his gaze unnervingly direct. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes," she stammered. "I wanted to speak with you privately, if you don't mind." He led her a few feet down the echoing hallway. "This whole process, it's unfortunate. I've reviewed your business plan, Amelia, and the daily grind has real potential. I'm prepared to offer a rather generous settlement, beyond what our lawyers would typically advise, and perhaps some personal assistance to help you navigate the next steps." He extended a sleek, black business card. "My personal number. Think about it." Amelia clutched the card, a knot of confusion and deep suspicion tightening in her gut. "It's a trap, Lena. I'm telling you, it's a trap." Amelia slammed her hand on the diner table, making their coffee cups jump. Lena, ever the calm in Amelia's storm, raised an eyebrow. "A trap for what? To give you money?" "To buy me out, obviously," Amelia hissed, gesturing wildly. "He's playing the good guy, making me think he's helping, but he just wants to strip the daily grind for parts. He's a shark, Lena. They don't offer generous settlements out of the goodness of their hearts. They do it when they want something bigger. My business, my customers, my unique blend." Lena sighed. "Are you sure you're not just paranoid?" Later that evening, in Amelia's apartment, Lena tried again. "Look, I get it, you've been burned before. But what if this is different? What if it's a lifeline?" Amelia hunched on the couch, Julian's card still on the table beside her phone, a glowing beacon of impossible hope and gnawing fear. "Lifelines come with strings, Lena. Always. My last landlord offered a flexible payment plan, then evicted me the moment my cafe hit a slow month. My ex-boyfriend offered support, then disappeared with my savings. I can't afford to be naive again, especially not with someone like Julian Thorne." Her voice was thick with exhaustion and a deep-seated distrust. Miles away, in his opulent penthouse apartment, Julian Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights a glittering tapestry below him. He held Amelia's business card, a simple, warm design that spoke of passion and dedication. No Palan's dime. The daily grind. He knew that feeling. The fight, the struggle, the fear of losing everything you poured your soul into. He recalled his own mother, working tirelessly in their small, struggling coffee shop, often going without so he could eat. He remembered the humiliation when larger chains tried to push them out. His offer to Amelia wasn't a corporate maneuver. It was a genuine desire to prevent another small dream from being crushed. A silent promise to a past he never forgot. The following morning, Amelia's apartment felt heavy with the weight of her sleepless night. Her reflection in the darkened window showed a woman teetering on the edge of defeat. She stared at Julian's business card. Her pride screamed at her to refuse, to fight until the bitter end, even if it meant losing everything. But desperation, cold and undeniable, whispered of a different path. This wasn't about trust, she told herself. It was about survival, about protecting what little she had left. With a deep, trembling breath, Amelia picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over the number. She would call, but she would do so with every single one of her walls still firmly in place. The aroma of roasted beans usually soothed Amelia, but today, in this upscale cafe that wasn't the daily grind, it only sharpened her nerves. Julian Thorne sat across from her, not in a lawyer's imposing suit, but a slightly less formal charcoal blazer, his posture relaxed, almost casual. Amelia, by contrast, felt every muscle in her body tensed, her spine ramrod straight. The steam rising from her untouched latte seemed to mock her internal turmoil. "Amelia," Julian began, his voice surprisingly soft, "I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I wanted to discuss the settlement terms not just as a legal formality, but as an opportunity." He leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes intense. "Your coffee shop, the daily grind, it has a unique spirit. I've been researching it. The community connection, the quality of your beans, there's real potential there." Amelia's guard remained firmly in place. "Potential for you to acquire it, you mean?" she countered, her voice dry. Julian offered a faint, almost regretful smile. "Not necessarily. No potential for growth, for something far more collaborative, if you're open to it." His words were a skilled deflection, yet there was something in his tone that piqued a flicker of Amelia's ever-present curiosity, despite her deep-seated suspicion. After their meeting, Julian suggested a walk through the nearby city park, a neutral ground away from the cafe's hushed, eavesdropping potential. Amelia agreed, albeit reluctantly, her mind whirring with questions about his unexpected demeanor. As they strolled past vibrant flower beds, Julian pointed to a small, independent food truck parked nearby. "See that vendor? They've got a fantastic pesto, but I bet their biggest challenge is sourcing quality basil at a consistent price without getting squeezed by distributors." Amelia blinked, surprised by his insight. "How did you?" "Years of observing and a few painful lessons myself," he replied, a shadow crossing his face. "When I was first starting out, before Thorne Coffee Company became, well, Thorne Coffee Company *, I ran a tiny stand. Almost went under trying to get my hands on decent beans without paying through the nose to the big importers. It taught me a lot about the unique vulnerabilities of small businesses." He met her gaze, a brief, genuine vulnerability in his eyes. He quickly masked it with a professional smile, but the moment had disarmed Amelia more than any formal offer could have. The following afternoon, Julian invited Amelia to a small business expo his foundation was sponsoring. Amelia, still reeling from his surprising insights and momentary personal reveal, decided to go. She watched, a silent observer, as Julian moved through the bustling hall. He wasn't merely shaking hands. He was genuinely engaging with vendors, asking about their challenges, offering contacts, even tasting samples with an earnest smile. He introduced Amelia to a woman who ran an artisanal tea shop, praising the daily grind's commitment to quality and community. "Amelia's a force to be reckoned with," he'd said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. The tea shop owner beamed. "Thorne Foundation helped us secure a fair trade supplier. Julian really walks the talk for small businesses." Amelia's internal narrative, so firmly rooted in ruthless corporate giant, began to fray at the edges. Could this be an elaborate act? Or was there a side to Julian Thorne she hadn't dared to consider? Later that week, Amelia found herself in Julian's private office, a sprawling space that overlooked the city skyline. She was there to present her business plan, part of the, quote, collaborative opportunity he'd mentioned. She expected a critique, perhaps a polite dismissal of her ambitious projections. Instead, Julian leaned over her meticulously crafted pages, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This sourcing strategy for your Ethiopian Yirgacheffe," he tapped a section. "Brilliant. You found a direct trade route that even my own team missed. And your expansion model, focusing on micro-locations, that's innovative." They spent the next hour dissecting bean origins, roasting profiles, and community outreach strategies. Amelia found herself animated, comfortable, discussing her deepest passion with a man who, just weeks ago, had been her sworn enemy. He pulled out a small bag of rare Costa Rican geisha beans from his drawer. "Try this," he said, brewing it in a small, intricate pour-over device he kept on his desk. "It reminds me of the first time I truly fell in love with coffee." As she savored the complex flavors, a genuine smile spread across Amelia's face, mirrored by Julian's. Back in her apartment that evening, the city lights a distant blur, Amelia found herself replaying every interaction with Julian. His intelligence, his unexpected kindness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She felt a warmth unfurl in her chest, a feeling she hadn't realized she was starved for. But then, a cold, familiar voice whispered in her mind, a ghost of every disappointment and betrayal she'd ever known. "He's a billionaire. He sued you. This is too good to be true. Don't trust rich men. They always have an agenda." She picked up his elegant business card, running her thumb over the raised lettering. Thorne Coffee Co. The name itself was a stark reminder of the corporate behemoth that still loomed over her small dream. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a finely spun web. The next morning, the comforting clatter of the daily grind was pierced by Lena's sharp intake of breath. She stood by the counter, a local newspaper held open, her face pale. "Amelia, you need to see this." Amelia wiped down the espresso machine, her heart sinking at the urgency in Lena's voice. She took the paper. The headline screamed, "Thorne Coffee Company acquires Bean and Brew. Chain CEO Julian Thorne continues aggressive market expansion." Below it, a photo showed Julian, impeccably dressed, shaking hands with a grim-faced executive. The article went on to detail Thorne's history of absorbing smaller, independent coffee businesses, often after initial legal disputes over trademarks or locations. Amelia felt a cold dread spread through her. Bean and Brew? They were just like us, family-owned, 2 locations, known for their artisanal roasts. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He's doing exactly what I thought. He's a corporate predator, Lena. This whole time, he was just gathering intelligence." That evening, Amelia paced her apartment like a caged animal, the newspaper article a crumpled ball in her fist. "It all makes sense now," she fumed to Lena, who sat patiently on the worn sofa. "The unexpected kindness, the shared passion, the business advice, it was all a show. He was getting me to drop my guard, to reveal my weaknesses. He probably knew my supplier information was invaluable. He was scouting me out, Lena. Not for a partnership, but for a takeover. He wants the daily grind." Lena tried to interject. "Amelia, maybe there's another explanation. He seemed so genuine at the expo." "Genuine?" Amelia scoffed, running a hand through her hair. "He's a master manipulator." Every compliment, every piece of advice, it was all to make me think he was different. "He's just like all the others, Lena. A shark in a tailored suit, pretending to care while he sharpens his teeth." Her voice cracked with a mixture of anger and a deeper, more painful sense of betrayal. The warmth she'd felt in Julian's office now felt like a cruel trick. The next afternoon, the bell above the Daily Grind's door chimed, and Amelia's blood ran cold. Julian Thorne stood in the doorway, a pleasant smile on his face, a sleek black briefcase in hand. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not now. Not when Amelia was convinced of his true, predatory nature. "Amelia," he said, his voice warm, "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd grab a coffee and see how things were going." He glanced around, taking in the cozy, bustling atmosphere. This place truly has charm, and the aroma, intoxicating as always. Amelia forced a smile that felt brittle. Mr. Thorne, to what do we owe the unexpected pleasure? Lena, sensing the glacial tension that now filled the small cafe, kept her head down, busying herself with refilling sugar caddies. Amelia watched Julian's every move, every admiring glance, every casual sip of his coffee, certain she was seeing through the facade, convinced she was witnessing a wolf in sheep's clothing, surveying his prey. Julian settled into a quiet corner booth, expecting a casual chat. But Amelia, unable to hold back, joined him, her voice carefully modulated, betraying none of the fury simmering beneath. "I saw the news, Mr. Thorne," she began, her eyes narrowed. "About Bean and Brew, another small, independent business brought into the Thorne Coffee Company fold." Julian's relaxed posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Ah, yes, a necessary strategic move. The market is consolidating, Amelia. It's either adapt or, well, you understand." He took a long sip of his coffee, his gaze momentarily fixed on the steam rising from the cup. He didn't meet her eyes. "Consolidation?" Amelia pressed, a bitter laugh escaping her. "Or aggressive acquisition? It seems your company has quite the track record of adapting smaller competitors right out of existence." Her words were a veiled accusation, a challenge thrown across the small table. Julian remained frustratingly vague, offering platitudes about market forces and synergistic opportunities. Every evasive answer, every avoided glance, felt like a validation of Amelia's darkest suspicions. Her heart sank, a heavy, cold stone in her chest. Amelia followed Julian out onto the darkening street, her patience frayed to breaking point. "Look me in the eye, Julian," she demanded, using his first name for the first time in anger. "Tell me this isn't about you trying to take over my business. Tell me your kindness wasn't just a tactic." Julian turned, his expression pained, but his lips remained pressed into a thin line. He wanted to explain, to tell her everything, but the complexities of his foundation's work and the ongoing negotiations made it impossible without revealing too much, too soon. He saw the hurt in her eyes, the accusation, and couldn't find the words to bridge the chasm of misunderstanding. He simply stood there, silent. Amelia stared at him, her chest heaving. His silence was all the proof she needed. He was using her. The dream of a genuine connection, a true ally, shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. "I knew it," she whispered, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. She turned abruptly, leaving him standing alone in the fading light, his hand reaching out, then dropping, defeated. The phone felt heavy in Amelia's trembling hand, the darkness of her apartment reflecting the despair in her heart. It was late, but she couldn't wait. She dialed her lawyer, the decision already made, hardened by the cold certainty of Julian Thorne's betrayal. "I'm pulling out," she stated, her voice firm despite the tremor deep inside her. "All settlement talks with Thorne Coffee Company. I'm not accepting any offer, no matter what it is." Her lawyer, Mr. Davies, sounded surprised. "Amelia, are you sure? This could mean you'll lose everything. They'll pursue the trademark claim aggressively now." "I know," she replied, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "But I'd rather lose the daily grind, fighting for what's mine, for its integrity, than let him buy me out. I won't be another one of his acquisitions. I won't be manipulated, Mr. Davies. Not again." She hung up, the finality of her decision a heavy weight. She had chosen defiance over what she perceived as a humiliating compromise, even if it meant sacrificing the business she'd poured her soul into. Her fight was far from over, but she would face it alone, on her own terms. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee usually filled the daily grind with a comforting warmth, but today, it did little to penetrate the chill Amelia felt. A week had passed since she'd stormed out of Julian Thorne's office, convinced of his duplicity, and now, the small television mounted in the corner of her cafe was broadcasting her worst fears. Lena stood beside her, remote in hand, her face a mask of concern. On the screen, a slick news anchor delivered the headline, "Thorne Coffee Company expands empire, local, bean and brew, chain acquired." A photo of a triumphant Julian Thorne flashed on screen, shaking hands with a grim-faced former owner. Amelia's stomach churned. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice tight with a bitter vindication. "I knew he was a shark." He just needed to soften me up, make me think he was some kind of savior, before he moved in for the kill. She slammed her fist on the worn counter, the sound echoing hollowly in the otherwise quiet cafe. Lena reached out, a comforting hand on Amelia's arm, but Amelia pulled away. "Don't, Lena. I was right. All of it. The kindness, the help, it was all a charade." Days blurred into a monotonous haze within the confines of Amelia's small apartment above the cafe. She felt foolish, humiliated, for even a moment entertaining the thought that Julian Thorne could be anything other than the ruthless corporate giant he now clearly was. Her once vibrant space, usually filled with the scent of coffee and the hum of creative energy, now felt like a cage. Unopened mail, a growing stack of legal documents she couldn't bear to look at, lay scattered on her coffee table. Amelia stared blankly at the ceiling, the peeling paint mirroring the cracks in her resolve. "How could I have been so naive?" she whispered to the empty room, her voice hoarse from disuse. The thought of fighting the lawsuit, of facing Thorne Coffee Company in court, felt like a Sisyphean task. She was outmatched, out-resourced, and now utterly demoralized. Her dream, the daily grind, felt like a crumbling edifice, and Amelia, the self-proclaimed architect, was too broken to care. Maybe it was better to just let it all go, to fold, to admit defeat. The bitter taste of failure was almost as potent as the sting of betrayal. Julian Thorne stared at his phone, the screen still displaying Amelia Vance's contact. He'd called her a dozen times, sent countless emails, each one more urgent than the last, pleading for a chance to explain. But every call went to voicemail, every email unanswered. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled dark hair, a rare moment of disarray betraying his inner turmoil. "Asterisk Amelia, please. Just hear me out. You don't understand. This isn't what you think. I need you to know the truth." His latest voicemail, left just minutes ago, had been tinged with a desperation he rarely allowed himself. He stared out at the sprawling city skyline from his opulent office, the view doing nothing to calm the knot in his stomach. He'd made a mistake, a critical error in judgment, by not being fully transparent. And now, he was losing her. Meanwhile, in her quiet apartment, Amelia's phone buzzed again, Julian's name flashing across the screen. Her jaw tightened. Another attempt to manipulate me? To smooth things over before the inevitable legal battle? Without a second thought, her finger hovered over the delete button, then pressed down hard, erasing his presence from her digital life as completely as she wished she could erase him from her thoughts. The insistent pounding on Amelia's apartment door finally broke through her self-imposed isolation. She dragged herself up, her movements sluggish, to find Lena, eyes blazing with a mix of concern and frustration, on her doorstep. "Amelia Vance, you open this door right now," Lena ordered, then pushed past her friend, surveying the disarray with a grimace. "What are you doing to yourself, hiding? Letting him win?" Amelia sank onto the couch, pulling a blanket around her like a shield. "There's nothing to win, Lena. He's already won. He's a corporate monster, and I was stupid enough to think he was different." Lena snatched the blanket away, her voice firm. "No, you are not giving up. Remember our dream? Remember all the late nights, the scraped knees, the endless cups of coffee we poured into this place? You built the daily grind from nothing. You don't get to just lie here and let him bury it. You fight, Amelia. Even if it means facing him again, you fight for what's yours." A sliver of resolve, fragile but present, flickered in Amelia's eyes. Lena's words, sharp and true, were like a splash of cold water. Later that evening, Amelia walked through the silent, empty cafe. The espresso machine, usually a buzzing heart, stood cold and dark. Her fingers traced the worn wood of the counter, the scuff marks on the floor, each imperfection a testament to years of hard work, laughter, and tears. She paused at a wall adorned with framed photos, the cafe's grand opening, Lena beaming, Amelia herself, younger, full of fierce hope. "Is this really it?" she whispered, the question hanging heavy in the quiet air. Her pride, a stubborn, unyielding thing, had always been her shield. It had protected her from accepting handouts, from becoming another person's charity case, from being used. But now, that same pride felt like a heavy chain, dragging her down. It was costing her everything she'd built, everything she loved. Yet, the fear of being used, of having her passion commodified and eventually stripped away, was a deeper, more primal fear. It gnawed at her, making her choose integrity over survival, even if survival meant a chance at saving her dream. The following afternoon, Amelia found herself amidst the vibrant chaos of the local farmer's market, her mind still heavy with the weight of her impending legal battle. She was picking out fresh berries, a rare indulgence, when a fragment of conversation from a nearby produce stall caught her ear. "Thorne Foundation, you know. Julian Thorne's charity." A local vendor, a kindly woman with flour dusted on her apron, was saying to a customer, "They really helped us out when we were just starting. Loaned us the seed money, gave us advice. Didn't ask for a thing in return. Mr. Thorne, he really gets it. Says his own mother started with just a small bakery, worked herself to the bone." Amelia froze, a half-filled basket of berries forgotten in her hand. Julian Thorne, his foundation, helping small businesses. The words ricocheted in her mind, creating a dissonant echo against her ingrained beliefs. She subtly edged closer, feigning interest in a display of artisanal jams. "Really?" she asked casually, hoping her voice didn't betray her sudden sharp curiosity. "I hadn't heard much about that." The vendor smiled, oblivious to Amelia's internal storm. "Oh yes, it's a quiet operation, but they do good work. Especially for us little guys. Mr. Thorne, he's got a real soft spot for family-run places." That night, Amelia's apartment was lit only by the cold glow of her laptop screen. The vendor's casual words had planted a seed of doubt, a tiny crack in the impenetrable wall of her conviction. She started with a general search. Julian Thorne Coffee Company Philanthropy. The initial results were boilerplate corporate press releases, nothing to contradict her narrative. But she kept digging, driven by a growing, frantic urgency. She clicked through obscure news archives, university alumni pages, small local business journals. There had to be something. Hours passed, the caffeine from her emergency brew doing little to quell the frantic energy coursing through her. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, multiple tabs open, each a potential rabbit hole. She found mentions of a, quote, Thorne Family Fund established years ago, reports of small grants for community projects, vague references to his early life. It was all so fragmented, so easily overlooked by mainstream media, focused as they were on the corporate takeover headlines. But something was there, a thread of a different story, hinting at a Julian Thorne she hadn't dared to imagine. Then, deep within an archived digital newspaper from almost 2 decades ago, Amelia found it, a grainy black-and-white photo. A young woman with tired but defiant eyes, standing in front of a modest storefront. The headline read, "Local Mother's Coffee Dream, Thorne's Brew Battles the Odds." Below it, a brief article detailed the struggles of Maria Thorne, a single mother who had poured her heart into a small coffee shop, the very first Thorne Coffee Company, against overwhelming odds after her husband abandoned them. Amelia's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She read the article aloud to herself, her voice a disbelieving whisper. Asterisk, raised her son Julian above the shop, often worked 2 jobs, determination to build a better life for her boy. Asterisk. The words painted a picture she knew all too well, a mirror image of her own fight with the daily grind. The corporate giant she had vilified had humble beginnings, born from the very struggle she herself was enduring. It was a revelation that shattered her perception of Julian Thorne, cracking open her carefully constructed wall of suspicion. The pieces clicked into place with a painful, undeniable clarity. Amelia's fingers, now trembling, typed Thorne Foundation Small Business Support into the search bar. This time, the results were abundant. A dedicated website, testimonials from thriving small businesses, a mission statement that read, to empower local entrepreneurs and single-parent business owners, providing the resources and mentorship needed to build sustainable legacies, inspired by the resilience of our founder's own mother. A tear traced a path down Amelia's cheek, landing softly on her keyboard. Nipe single-parent business owners. Julian's personal history hadn't just inspired his philanthropy, it was his philanthropy. He hadn't been a predator, he had been an empath, seeing his mother's struggle reflected in hers. His initial offer, the kindness, the insights into her business, it wasn't manipulation, it was understanding, it was genuine. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, a profound, overwhelming sense of misunderstanding and regret. Every angry word, every suspicious glance, every moment of self-righteous indignation replayed in her mind, each one a fresh stab of pain. The first rays of dawn crept through her window, illuminating the scattered research papers that now lay like accusations around her. Amelia buried her face in her hands, a silent scream of regret tearing through her. She had been so wrong. So utterly, painfully wrong. Julian's initial kindness, his generous offer, his patient attempts to explain, all of it had been genuine. Her pride, her past hurts, her ingrained distrust of anyone with wealth, had twisted his empathy into a sinister plot. She hadn't just misjudged him. She had potentially ruined a true opportunity. And worse, she had unjustly wounded an empathetic man. The weight of her error was crushing, a desperate wish to undo her actions, to retrieve the words she'd flung at him, burning in her chest. She had pushed away the very help she desperately needed, all because she couldn't see past her own prejudice. Lena, her face a mask of determined concern, sat across from Julian Thorne in a quiet upscale restaurant. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the clinking of silverware, the only sound breaking the silence. Julian, looking surprisingly vulnerable in his impeccably tailored suit, leaned forward, his blue eyes earnest. "Thank you for meeting me, Lena," he began, his voice low and steady, yet edged with desperation. "I know Amelia won't listen, but I had to try to explain. Everything she thinks, it's not what it seems." Lena, ever the pragmatist, merely nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Amelia's hurting, Julian. She feels betrayed. You need to understand that. So tell me, really tell me, why did you sue her? And why are you suddenly so interested in the daily grind?" Julian ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of raw honesty. "Because she reminds me of my mother," he confessed, the words a raw whisper. "And because I saw a spark in her business, a passion I recognized from my own past." He then launched into a story, a detailed, heartfelt confession that spanned decades, filled with unexpected humility and quiet pain. Amelia paced her small apartment, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Every minute Lena was gone felt like an hour. When the door finally burst open, Lena stood there, her eyes wide and glistening, a mixture of shock and profound sadness on her face. "Amelia!" Lena breathed, rushing forward and taking Amelia's hands, her touch surprisingly firm. "You won't believe what Julian told me. Everything you thought, you were wrong. So incredibly wrong." Amelia stared, a cold dread washing over her, but Lena's intensity compelled her to listen. "He grew up poor, Amelia," Lena hurried on, her voice cracking with emotion. "His mother, Maria Santos, was a single parent. She ran a tiny coffee shop, just like yours. She struggled, sacrificed everything. And when his father left, she worked herself to the bone to keep it afloat. That lawsuit? It was about a patent on the name, Daily Grind, that his mother actually coined decades ago. But she never trademarked it properly. He found out about your shop and saw the name, and it hit him." Tears streamed silently down Amelia's face. The pieces were clicking into place, not with the cold logic of betrayal, but with the searing heat of a terrible misunderstanding. "But the news reports," Amelia whispered, her voice hoarse, "the acquisitions, the aggressive expansion." Lena shook her head, pulling a stack of documents from her bag. He explained that, too. "Thorne Coffee Company does acquire smaller chains, yes, but it's usually struggling ones. He streamlines operations, invests in their staff, and helps them thrive under the Thorne Foundation's umbrella. He doesn't strip them for parts. He rebuilds them." "And your offer?" "It wasn't a hostile takeover, Amelia. It was a partnership. He wanted to invest in the Daily Grind, to help you expand, to mentor you. He saw your passion, your dedication, and he wanted to nurture it, not crush it. He said he saw so much of his mother in you, her resilience, her fight. He respects you, Amelia. He genuinely admires you." Amelia sank onto the worn sofa, the weight of Lena's words pressing down on her. The truth was a physical blow, stripping away her anger and leaving behind a hollow ache of regret. She had been so wrong. The apartment was quiet once more, Lena having left to give Amelia space. Amelia walked to the grimy bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. Dark circles haunted her eyes, but it was the shame that burned brightest. She had been so quick to judge, to assume the worst of Julian Thorne. His wealth, his power, his initial lawsuit, they had all been filters through which she'd viewed him, blinding her to the genuine empathy beneath. Her own past hurts, the constant struggle, the fear of vulnerability, they had built walls so high, she couldn't see the helping hand reaching over them. She had been so proud, so convinced of her own narrative of the ruthless rich and the struggling poor, that she had refused to even consider an alternative. The bitter irony was that her pride, her fierce independence, had almost cost her everything she cherished and driven away the one person who truly understood her fight. Amelia found Lena back at the cafe, meticulously cleaning the espresso machine, a silent act of defiance against the impending legal battle. "Lena," Amelia said, her voice firm, a new resolve in her eyes. "I need to go to him. I need to apologize. I need to tell him I understand." Lena straightened up, a warm smile spreading across her face. "I knew you would," she said, her voice filled with relief. "He's still hoping, Amelia. He hasn't given up on you. Or on the daily grind." Amelia nodded, a nervous flutter in her chest, but determination hardening her resolve. "I need to be as brave as he was. To put my pride aside and just be honest." Lena stepped forward, giving Amelia a tight hug. "You are the bravest person I know, Amelia Vance. Now go get him." Amelia pulled away, a nervous but hopeful smile touching her lips. She would find him, and she would make things right. In the opulent silence of his penthouse office, Julian Thorne stared out at the sprawling city lights, a glass of untouched whiskey on his polished desk. His gaze fell to a worn business plan, Amelia's business plan, still sitting where she'd left it days ago. A pang of sadness tightened his chest. He admired her fierce independence, her unwavering passion, her refusal to be intimidated. It was what had drawn him to her, what had reminded him so powerfully of his own mother, but it was also what had driven her away. He knew she wouldn't call. He knew she thought he was a predator. Yet a stubborn flicker of hope persisted. He'd left so much unsaid, so much misunderstood. Perhaps, just perhaps, if he reached out one last time. But no, he wouldn't push her further. If she couldn't see the truth, then perhaps it was not meant to be. He sighed, the city lights reflecting the quiet determination in his eyes. The taxi sliced through the evening traffic, the towering structure of Thorne Tower growing larger with every block. Amelia clutched her handbag, her knuckles white. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of nerves and anticipation. "Okay, Amelia," she whispered to herself. "Deep breaths. You can do this. You explain. You apologize. You tell him you understand." She rehearsed the words in her head, trying to find the perfect blend of sincerity and strength. What if he refused to see her? What if he was still angry? The thought made her stomach clench, but she pushed it down. She had to try. This wasn't just about the daily grind anymore. It was about her own integrity, about correcting a terrible wrong, and about a connection she now realized was far more profound than she had allowed herself to believe. The taxi pulled up to the curb, and Thorne Tower loomed, a monument to the man she had so deeply misjudged. The Thorne Tower pierced the late afternoon sky like a needle of steel and glass, a monument to the very corporate power Amelia Vance had railed against. Its opulent lobby, with marble floors that gleamed like polished ice and soaring ceilings that made her feel impossibly small, was a universe away from the cozy, mismatched charm of the daily grind. Her simple dress, borrowed from Lena, felt like a costume in this grand theater of wealth. Amelia clutched her worn handbag, her palms damp, a nervous glance darting around the hushed, imposing space. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. She approached the sleek, modern reception desk, where a woman with an impeccably coiffed bun and a serene smile sat behind a screen that glowed like a portal to another world. "Excuse me," Amelia began, her voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the confident roar she'd practiced in the taxi. "I am here to see Julian Thorne." She braced herself for dismissal, for the polite but firm suggestion that she make an appointment, that people like her didn't just walk in to see people like him. Amelia was led to the top floor, the private elevators whisking her upwards faster than she could comprehend. Her stomach fluttered with a mix of dread and dizzying hope. The receptionist pointed to a heavy oak door at the end of a long, pristine hallway, and then retreated, leaving Amelia utterly alone. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, she pushed the door open. Julian Thorne stood silhouetted against the panoramic city skyline, his back to her, a phone pressed to his ear. He was in the process of hanging up, his shoulders slightly slumped, as if the weight of the day had finally caught up to him. He turned, perhaps to gather his things, and his gaze landed on her, standing tentatively in his doorway. His eyes, usually so sharp and controlled, widened in undisguised shock. The weariness seemed to melt away, replaced by a glimmer of incredulity, then a fragile, dawning hope that took Amelia's breath away. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He simply stared, a silent question hanging in the air between them, reflecting every unspoken thought and feeling they had both harbored since their last, fractured encounter. The air crackled with a tension so profound it felt like a shared breath. "Amelia," Julian finally managed, his voice a low, disbelieving whisper. He took a hesitant step toward her, as if afraid she might vanish. Amelia's carefully rehearsed speech evaporated, replaced by the raw, trembling truth. "Julian," she began, her voice thick with emotion, I am so incredibly sorry. For everything, for what I said, for what I assumed. My pride, my fear, it made me blind. I was so convinced you had some hidden agenda, some manipulative plan to take over my business, that I couldn't see the truth." She looked down, unable to meet his gaze, shame burning her cheeks. "I accused you, I judged you, and I walked away from what might have been the best thing to ever happen to me." She lifted her eyes, finally meeting his. "Lena told me some things, and then I did my own research. I looked into the Thorne Foundation. I read about your mother, about how Thorne Coffee Company really started, and I realized I was so wrong, so unbelievably, terribly wrong. You weren't trying to buy me out, you were trying to help. And I threw it all back in your face." A tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Julian reached out, his hand gently cupping her chin, tilting her face up. His touch was warm, reassuring. "Amelia," he said softly, his blue eyes filled with a profound understanding, "don't apologize for protecting your dream. I understand why you reacted the way you did. My silence, my evasiveness, I didn't handle it well, but I'm so glad you're here." Julian led her to the comfortable seating area of his office, the grandeur fading into the background as their intimate conversation began. "My mother, Maria Thorne, she was a force." He started, his voice a little shaky, a vulnerability Amelia had never imagined. "She raised me alone in a small apartment above a tiny coffee shop. Her dream, much like yours. My father left when I was 7, and suddenly, everything was on her. She worked day and night, scrubbing floors, roasting beans, making ends meet. She went without food so I could eat, smiled when she was exhausted, and always told me that one day, Thorne Coffee would be more than just a struggle." He paused, a flicker of pain in his eyes. "When I saw you, Amelia, battling for the daily grind, the way you fought for every customer, the desperation in your eyes, but the unyielding spirit in your heart, it was like looking at my mother all those years ago. All I wanted to do was help, to prevent you from going through what she did. My offer wasn't about acquisition, it was about partnership, about nurturing a dream I understood intimately." He took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering. "And then, as I got to know you, as we talked about coffee, about business, about passion, it became more than just helping a struggling entrepreneur. I found myself thinking about you constantly, about your strength, your integrity, your quiet determination. I realized I wasn't just offering a settlement. I was falling for you, Amelia. Not the owner of a small coffee shop, but Amelia, the incredible woman who reminded me what truly matters." Amelia's heart swelled, a dam of fear and distrust finally breaking. Julian's words, so raw and honest, resonated with a truth she now recognized in her own heart. I saw it too, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Those moments when you weren't the ruthless CEO, when you were just Julian, I felt it, that connection. But I've been hurt so many times, let down by so many people, that I built walls around myself. I was so afraid of being used, of being a charity case, that I pushed away the very kindness I desperately needed. She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. I was wrong about you, and I was wrong to let my past define my future. Julian. She looked into his eyes, a profound sense of understanding passing between them. I think I've been falling for you too. Despite everything, despite my fears, despite my own terrible judgment, you saw something in me that no one else has. You saw my dream, and you wanted to help it grow, not crush it. A shared, knowing smile bloomed between them, a silent promise of a future built on this newfound truth. So, Julian said, his smile widening, about that partnership. My offer still stands. The Thorne Foundation is ready to invest in the daily grind, not to own it, not to brand it, but to provide the resources, the mentorship, the expansion capital you need. You retain full ownership, full creative control. You keep your unique identity. I just want to help you make your dream bigger, stronger. Are you still interested in letting me be your ally? Amelia's eyes sparkled with a joy and excitement she hadn't felt in years. Are you serious? She breathed. To keep the daily grind, to grow it, with your support, but still my daily grind. Julian nodded. Absolutely. You built something special, Amelia. It deserves to thrive. Then yes, she exclaimed, a genuine, unrestrained laugh bubbling out of her. 1,000 times, yes! Let's build something incredible together, Julian. A partnership of hearts and coffee. They leaned closer, their heads almost touching as they looked at the original, somewhat crumpled business plan Amelia had brought, a shared vision already beginning to form in their minds. The business plan, once a symbol of contention, now became a bridge between them. Julian reached out, his hand gently finding her cheek, his thumb stroking softly. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, Amelia saw not just admiration, but a deep, abiding love that mirrored her own. The fear that had once clouded her heart had vanished, replaced by a radiant warmth. Amelia, he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Amelia didn't. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed. His lips met hers in a tender, hopeful kiss that erased all past doubts, all misunderstandings. It was a kiss that sealed not just a business partnership, but a profound emotional commitment, a promise of a new beginning, forged in truth and understanding. The soft light of the setting sun streamed through the office windows, casting a golden glow around them, as if blessing their union. 1 year later, the daily grind buzzed with an energy Amelia had only dreamed of. The small, worn cafe had expanded into the adjacent storefront, now a vibrant, bustling hub that still retained its unique, cozy character. A tasteful, discreet sign near the entrance read, "The Daily Grind, a Thorne Foundation Partner." Julian and Amelia moved through the cafe with an easy, loving rhythm, a team in every sense of the word. He often helped with the morning rush, his corporate suits replaced by casual shirts, his deep insights now applied to optimizing coffee bean sourcing and customer flow. Lena, ever the steadfast friend, laughed loudly behind the counter, expertly crafting lattes and chatting with regulars. She caught Amelia's eye and winked, a silent acknowledgement of how far they'd come. Amelia smiled, then turned to find Julian watching her, a warm, proud glint in his eyes. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Their love story, born from a legal battle and a profound misunderstanding, had blossomed into a beautiful partnership, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are found when you dare to look beyond the surface and trust the kindness of an unexpected heart.